Wowza, hi there, how's it going? Not gonna lie, I almost forgot to record one for today. Quick update, life stuff, nothing really. I think I said in my last video, my friend's moving out with me, which is good. It's good for him, because, it'll be a lot cheaper for him. Good for me, because my friend's coming out, and, it's nice to have friends. Then also, it makes it more definitive that when I need to move out, I'll for sure have a roommate, because we'll be moving out at the same time, obviously, so I don't have to worry about that. So that's reassuring. Other news, also, I definitely didn't say this last time, I also got, the way my job works is I sort of have to kind of bid for hours. I'm only guaranteed, 15 or so per paycheck period, but I can opt in for a lot more and go to other places and work there. But because my main job is really just to fill in when people are sick or want vacation. So, week to week my hours are a little rough sometimes, but for the most part I stay over what I was making before, which was consistent hours, but my wage was a lot lower. Now my wage is a lot higher. I get inconsistent hours, but I've been managing to hit at minimum what I was making before, but oftentimes a little to a lot more. But I got news here that a place I fill in for a lot, I worked for them for a while, and then they had a clerk join and get hired. But the clerk is not great, and people don't really like them, and it's seeming that they are quitting. So I will have those hours back. Yippee, woohoo. I'm excited for that. But we'll see. At the minimum, I have, I've been kind of just going week by week. I have this week covered, I have next week covered, and then I have a little bit of the week after covered. We'll have to see. I have Thursday and Friday off, which I might just take off, because that's fun. I really got past this guy in front of me. He's gonna piss me off. He's going inconsistent between it's a 65, and he's turning. Kill me. I'll say, and he was going between 60 and 75. He would just slow up, speed up and slow down almost at random. Come on, bucko. Turn, 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 turn. See ya. Oh boy. Update for me. Good news for me, because that means I will have money and an income, and I don't have to worry too much about that. Thank God. Other news. Okay. So actually, what I was talking about Tuesday, I want to touch on, because I ended off kind of clickbaity of my issue with trans people. Okay, guy, semi, I get it, bro. You're passing me? No, the fuck you aren't, dipshit. Brother's trying to go 85 and a 65. What are you talking about? I can make his life hell. Oh, I want to do it. But I really don't want to brake check a semi. That doesn't sound like a great idea. Fucking asshole. Holy shit. God, I hope he ditches himself. Whatever. What's the Northline bit? I hope nothing bad happens to him, but I hope when something does, he burns in hell. Hi, cows. Anyway, so I want to kind of talk about gender, which is, it's kind of actually a weird further continuation of my talk of imperialism, which started this whole thing. There's this weird breed, and the sequel to me punching at the wrong people, because ultimately, and I can't stress enough, the worst motherfuckers in the world are the wealthy. The top 1%. To be honest, probably like the top 20% if we're being real serious. Like boomers, like this real estate owners, all those kinds of people. Like the motherfuckers who are like, oh, you don't hate like the mom and pop shop owners that own one house, right? Yeah, I do fucking hate them because they constantly vote against their best interest and then the best interest of their fellow man. There's nothing necessarily wrong with owning a business or owning a house. Well, there is, but like as far as our current society goes. But there's a specific group of people who are like evil and do that, and fuck them too. But anyway, got flashbang a little mesmerized. That guy's lights are wonky. I hate this semi so much. Yeah, we get it, bro. You're fast. But yeah, so it's the ultra wealthy, and then the next group is like the poor people who enable them. Then it's like purely Nazis, and then it goes like just like general conservatives, and then it's the people that I kind of hate more, not like on a. And I don't hate them on a real like. I think they're gonna burn in hell like I think they do Nazis, but like people who I wish would do better. Like I hate their current selves the most, and I believe they have the capacity to do better. And that group is people who are generally progressive in some areas, but share the same views as either conservatives or Nazis in others. And like depending on the Nazi conservative view, they are Nazis or conservatives. Like progressive values be damned, get that shit twisted. But that's a group that I constantly find myself the most frustrated with. And you see this a lot. You see this with people who are anti-imperialist, but still believe in imperialism of some value, or they believe in nationalism, or they're also just racist or sexist themselves. You see this a lot, and this is where intersectionality is really important. You see like a lot of gay guys or like gay men who are misogynistic. You see a lot of black men who are very misogynistic. A lot of misogyny generally. You'll see white women who aren't misogynistic, although sometimes they are, but they're like racist or something like that. Or yeah, you'll see a black. You'll see a black woman, and she, fairly progressive on like pro African American like policies, very feminist, really homophobic, and it's like, okay, how do you? And for all these groups, it's always just like it's just weird in between of like, man, really your whole worldview is kind of dependent on your like lived experience, empathy type shit. And so groups where you don't just have a shared lived experience with, you can't even like process like how their struggles are similar to yours. And it's very strange. And I know it is a little ironic that I, as a white, like male passing, straight passing guy, to be yapping about this. But I think it's kind of why, I don't know. I do feel like it's kind of why I got legs in the race, is because it's also a thing, and where it's one of those things too where it's like, as a leftist, you know, if you're like me, if you're like a white straight passing guy passing dude or whatever, anytime you kind of dip away from what's considered progressive, you're rightfully like pretty hard locked it like on it, right? Like people instantly clock that shit. They instantly go, okay, you're kind of not, like, you're not progressive or whatnot. But once you kind of start in-grouping yourself with some minorities, or some minority qualifiers, you start getting a lot of leeway that I think is really unhelpful to the broader like discussion and broader movement, and sometimes even like excused for it. Like there's a lot of times where like seemingly other black, like progressive people, I have seen like gay guys excuse black women for being homophobic because they're black women, and it's like, and because, you know, because they have a different struggle, and the struggle is arguably worse than being like a gay man. I'm not here to oppression Olympics and shit, but like, no, you don't give a pass for that stuff, because ultimately it just causes harm. And because that's the other thing that's crazy too, is where these people don't realize is like, man, the same rhetoric and arguments that people use for like homophobia are like also weaponized against like women or like black people or other minorities, and so by utilizing that language to make an out-group of people, like demonizing them and attacking them, you're essentially giving that argumentation like valid legs to run, which really sucks when it starts getting used against you. And this is like most apparent is when queer, like the queer demographic starts infighting a little. You see this sometimes where like, you see there's like a lot of variations of it. Everyone just kind of hates people who are bisexual, which is, you know, and a lot of the talk they use about that are thrown right back at them. Talks about faking it, or it being like a choice, or like that sort of thing, immediately just like thrown back in their face. You see this sometimes, like lesbian women who are just for some reason very homophobic, and then also vice versa, of course. And I'd actually say this is a larger group of gay men who are very misogynistic, but they'll use that misogyny in a way to kind of shit on lesbians or the idea of lesbians, and the same like shit gets thrown right back. And I think the most like apparent version of this is when people whose queerness is sexual in nature, they will shit on the gender stuff. They will shit on people who are trans, non-binary, and whatnot. And their dialogue and the rhetoric they use is literally like one-to-one copied from like conservatives, TERFs, Nazis, where it's like, oh yeah, you're transgender? Well, this must mean you're like a child predator. And the person saying it is like a lesbian woman or like a gay guy. And it's like, brother, glass house, man. Like, if being, like, according to the logic they use, if being, like, trans means you're a child predator, being gay means you're a child predator. The people don't seem to recognize that. It's very silly. Anyway, the reason I'm talking about this is just because, like, just because I want to sort of try to hammer home that, like, this is sort of why a consensus matters on kind of like the dialogue, like the rhetoric. Not that you can't ever disagree or have different opinions or whatnot, but I think there's too often a person is a minority, and they are now have a pass to sort of speak on a different minority, and like that opinion has more value than if it was just like a straight white guy saying it, which I am suspicious of. And I'll even go so far to say on occasion, like, this is the whole, like, the self-hatred type stuff, the Brianna Woos of the world, or, they mean even, like, the terms of, like, Uncle Tom's or whatever. Just because you're a minority, like, most of the time doesn't even really give you, like, an inherent valid opinion on your own self as a minority, or like your own minority. There are a lot of women who have very internalized like misogyny. A lot of TERFs who will say stuff that is like fucking crazy. Like they'll say like to your face, like, yeah, women are caretakers and they like deserve to belong in the kitchen. And you're like, what? And you can be like, oh, that's batshit insane. And then the response is like, who are you to tell me that? I'm a woman. Like, you don't know what it's like. And it's like, okay, we've now sort of, we've now gotten to like what I call the woke gray zone, which is why the importance of dark woke is so important. Because I feel like a lot of times that kind of behavior is sort of excused, or it's like not pressed on. Like now the only person who can comment on it is like another woker woman. But that makes it difficult, especially because they're internalized misogynists, because they don't even like now trust the opinions of other women. There's this sort of mean-spirited but sort of true like reaction to an conservative pundits like who speak on this sort of things like trash-talk behavior, like Candace Owens, for example, or other like female like commentators in that space will comment on something, and then people will respond to be like, well, why would I listen to you? Like, women are stupid, belong in the kitchen, let me talk to your husband. And it's kind of like, yeah, like you're kind of just repurposing the vile shit, which is sort of problematic. But at the same time, it's kind of true, and also kind of like is what they're advocating for, which makes this weird point. Like, you will have like black people talk about how like untrustworthy they are as like a population or whatever, or how like you gotta watch out for black people because like they like robbing people or something, you know what I mean? And it is accurately recognized as extremely racist when a white guy says it, but when a black person themselves say it, it kind of gets waved off as like lived experience, sorta. And it's like, no, man, that guy is also just racist to himself. Like, he's internalized the majority opinion. Like, that's entirely what like the systemic like what it means to have like systemic racism and whatnot. Like the culture for that is to propagate that idea in their minds, but you can't really push back on it because like again, it's just sort of given a pass, and it's hard because like at one point in time too, again, it's like, okay, who's really causing the problems in America? Is it this white straight guy neo-Nazi, or is it like the black person with some internalized racism? And it's like obviously the Nazi, but I don't know. But at the same time, when you're like, and this is also like the main time I see this come up is when you're trying to sort of police your own communities, which is the thing, which I think this is where it really has value, because like already in your own community, you don't want straight white guy neo-Nazis. They're already like kicked out. They're not like, they're already villain, evil number one. You want to have, like, you want to have like black people in your community because, their experience is valuable, and there is parts of systemic issues that only they can really like truly recognize and address. But at the same time, then you gotta sort of make themselves like, you have to sort of police that they're not causing negative feedback to other members of your community. And now we're getting to like my true overall like wanted to discuss here. And this is the community that I am most familiar with, so I feel the most comfortable talking about it, is the queer community, and specifically the trans community. Despite my appearance, which I know you can't really see anymore, despite my appearance, big guy, got a beard, got a mustache, mainly because I think it makes me look hot. And also I think when you're a big big person, the beard and the mustache is the only really way to make your face look normal. Maybe that's just internalized on my part. I don't know. I think it fucks. But there's like a strong portion of my life, and arguably still to this day, where like I identified more as a girl. And this is from, I first learned that I was, at least had gay, what's the word? I don't know if tendencies is the right word, inclination maybe. I had a not straight inclination probably when I was about 14. When I turned 16 is when I first had a not cisgender like inclination. When I was 16, I also fully recognized myself as pansexual. And then when I was 18 is the first time that I identified as I started to kind of identify as a girl. Because I recognized at least that I didn't recognize myself as a man. I use girl. I guess woman's a term. I know they're interchangeable to me. I know there's a bit of a stigma about using like boys and girls versus man and woman. I guess male and female is usable, but that's also more of a scientific term. But I was a teenager when I first kind of transitioned, which is why I use girl. I don't even really consider myself like, even if I was cisgender, I think it'd be awkward to call myself like a man now. I guess I'm like more of a guy, and for me, it's more guys and girls than boys and girls. But that's just, I don't know. That's a weird thing in like language, where boys and guys are kind of dissimilar, but girls is kind of the same word for younger woman, but also kind of older woman. Which, I think there's something to unpack there about just the general pedophilic tendencies of Western culture, but in kind of cultures everywhere, to be honest, patriarchal cultures. But I digress. I guess like guys and gals is the main thing. I'll try using that from now on. So when I was 18, I was one of the first time I like really tried. I started identifying as a gal. That works. And it was because I really didn't recognize myself as a guy, and I didn't really get non-binary to an extent, as far as like, because for me at the time, non-binary still meant I recognized at least I was somewhat like guy, which I understand now. Non-binary is more than that. And at the moment, I would probably classify myself as non-binary. We'll get even further that I just hate classifications in general. But anyway, I started recognizing myself and started to be asked as trying to be perceived as a gal. But then I realized that, and one of the reasons for this too, it wasn't just a rejection of being a guy, but also like a lot of things associated with gals was like being in touch with her emotions, like empathy, not really liking, being more homebody-ish, like being more like caretaker-like, that sort of stuff. Liking like even smaller things, like at the time was like liking to read was kind of seen as more of a gal thing. I was super into like, I like fashion. I'm not very like good at it, or I don't keep like super in touch, but I like aesthetics like a lot, like that sort of thing. And like pretty much for my entire life, almost all of my friend group has been like majority girls, like, and then like women. Pretty much like at any point in time you could pick out, I pretty much had like one guy friend and then like 6 gal friends. And that's just how it was. I don't know. I always just found that I did not get along with a lot of guys very well, and I got along with a lot of gals very well. But I then started to realize that, one, I kind of self-analyzed a little on why I felt like a gal, and I kind of felt like I was just sort of giving into stereotypes a little about what gals should be and what they like, and realizing that like guys can like the same stuff too, which is something I knew before, but was just kind of, I don't know, just didn't really factor into my decision making at the time, that I sort of rectified later. And two, I realized that when I was really like thinking about it, I didn't really identify with gals either the same way as guys, in the sense that like, and this is what I was saying about not liking classifications, is I realized like, man, really trying to put myself into any sort of box, a box with multiple characteristics, it was just never going to work, because I am the complex individual who has interests, likes, and dislikes who vary between other people, and so I really cannot share like a pure overall commonality, which is something that I feel gets really lost in trans and gender conversations. And this is a real, I don't know, in my opinion, this is a real Judith Butler type thinking. So, you know, whatever your thoughts on them are is probably going to be something similar to what I share. But, like, I can identify with classifications of, like, person who likes video games. Yeah, that's me. But what I really hate is lots of those assumptions. And then I also really hate, like, lots of those clarifications put in one box. But I especially hate when people make assumptions based off those boxes. Like, I really, like, even a, like, I'm gonna do it real quick. Like, a group of people I tend to not like is, like, stan communities. Like, people who, like, really love Taylor Swift, and they are all the time posting about Taylor Swift, and all their merch, and pictures, and videos, and all their, like, extracurriculars and concerts are all based around Taylor Swift. I generally do not like these people. Now, partially, I don't like them because of the way they treat themselves. But, I'll be honest, when, like, I see a Twitter account or something, or there's, like, a person, and they're, like, blinged out in Taylor Swift stuff, I make some assumptions about them. You know, I think I make the first assumption that they're annoying. They're cringe. They have a lot more money, free money, and free time than they probably should. Or, like, not using it properly. But if I was to look myself in the mirror and be honest, I hate that I do that. I'm sure there are a lot of Swifties who are completely well-adjusted, fine people who don't really spend what they consider excess time and money on it. They're like normal, well, like adjusted, can have conversations without being cringe or annoying. And what I'm doing, and even though it is something as inconsequential as being a Swiftie, as I'm putting these negative value judgments on people who I've never really met and don't know, and I'm kind of forcing them to deal with that. And I hate that. I hate when I do that, and I feel sorry for the people that it happens to. And it's a practice I'm currently, like, always trying to, like, lose. And there's some extensions to that. Again, we're like, I still have a negative value judgment on the idea that, like, being so involved in someone else, and also self-identifying with the classification of, like, being, like, a Taylor Swift fan, I think is harmful, because I think you make those assumptions for yourself. Like I think you start sort of self-policing. You kind of put yourself in the panopticon, and start going, like, what should I be doing? Like, oh, Taylor Swift album just dropped. What is my response as a Swiftie? Not, like, necessarily what is my response as an individual with, like, free thoughts and feelings. And then you can kind of start measuring yourself based on what you think the ideal Swiftie response is, and then what you can muster. Or you start judging other people based off what your opinion of a Swiftie is and how much yours, like, falls in line with it. I think there's just a lot of negative habits that come with self-identifying and that sort of thing. And that's really how I feel about gender. I truly, yeah, I know, get some whiplash. Swifties and people who identify with a gender, same thing. But I cannot see the benefit of if you were born a cis man as identifying as a woman, and not because I don't think they can be or whatever on some conservative bullshit, but in the sense that all you're doing is you're rejecting a set of boxes, classifications that you have, and then you're now attempting to fill up an endless contradictory amount of boxes, and then contradictory in the sense that a lot of how we define gender are based on contradictions, where it's stuff being a man, for example. One example of a contradictory sort of implication is that a guy is supposed to never show emotions, but he's also supposed to be really assertive and angry and possessive, and he's he's allowed to sort of get loud and stuff. And some of those are unspoken rules, some of those are spoken, and part of it is the weird way that the emotions men show, men stereotypically show, aren't considered emotions for some reason. But if you're not a man or raised like that, and you're trying to become a man, they are aspects of the stereotype that will seem off to you, that you won't really be able to fulfill. And there's a lot more contradictions and better ones that a lot smarter people have written about. I'm trying to think of one for women off the top of my head. Okay, let's just go one about sexuality or whatever, where it's as a woman you're supposed to sort of put out, you're supposed to have be sexually available for what whoever would deem themselves as a high value man or whatever. You're supposed to sort of be you're supposed to sort of be sexy and erotic and beautiful and want sex and have it with the right people. But the second you have sex, you're now completely devalued as a person and seen as lesser. Which is just a contradiction. How can you be sort of an erotic, sexually promiscuous object of affection and a comforter and that sort of thing, while also not actually engaging in the action that would technically make you lose value, because you then become seen as having autonomy. You're supposed to be ogled at and used, but never actually, but unfortunately, a disposable item. The second you're used, you lose value. It's completely contradictory, but trying to, and you see this sometimes a lot with the with the sort of small demographic of trans girls, trans gals who try to sort of engage in that sexually, more sexually promiscuous type beat, where they are on one hand they are never they will on one hand actually be objects of sexual affection, but on the other hand they are shamed and belittled for it, and it leaves a lot of them to have very unhealthy views of not only themselves but kind of sexual boundaries overall. And then that's just one example. There's again a lot better examples from a lot smarter people. But anyway, to get to the point of what I'm trying to say is any sort of self-identifying with something, especially as broad of a category as gender, you're only hurting yourself, because you are now trying to measure your infinitely complex self to very simple concepts and actions that you can't do. And there is one exception to this, and this is not just true for gender, by the way. That's just one I'm more familiar with. This is the same for race as well. You'll see it, one example, Asian people or whatever. There's a lot of unhealthy attitudes with Asian Americans, and this is stereotypically so, but it's also sort of self-policed, where this idea that like Asian Americans need to be extremely hyper intelligent and extremely successful in school and strong business people and lawyers and doctors and need to play 6 instruments and three like martial arts, and it causes this complete like weird shaping of like extremely harmful ideas of what children are, and like childhood and love and responsibility from parents to children, and sometimes like some people just, and for a variety of circumstances, aren't built for the stereotype. And there are a lot of Asian Americans who fall into some sort of like depression or negative social like family relations or negative self-worth because they weren't able to live up to those pressures. That's another example of this. There is one time, or one mode, in my opinion, where self-identifying with the group is helpful. It's when and it's only when you are identified as part of a group by someone else. So for example, like if you are born like a cisgender woman or whatever, and you are identified as such by a patriarchy, the only way, and like you are discriminated against based on that, the only way to stop being discriminated against and gain power for yourself is to identify as a woman. It's to collectively unify based off that self-identifier in order to accurately push back and fight, push back against that discrimination and try to dismantle that oppressive structure. And then that's the value, and that's what feminists have been trying to do. And a lot of feminists and feminist writers recognize this, where especially gender conscious, like intersectional ones, will recognize that hey, the idea of an essence of a woman is extremely harmful. It's extremely not possible. It's contradictory. It's a byproduct of patriarchy, and it also doesn't really make sense when you think about it from a nurture v nature kind of perspective, which it's nature and nurture, but that's why it doesn't make sense, because again, the same reason why it's misogynistic or whatever to be women are great caretakers and they're the only ones suitable to be motherhood, and that's why they shouldn't have jobs, they should just be stay-at-home moms, hitting the same line of logic of yeah, women are caretakers and empathy, and that's our essence as a woman, and that's why we are great type of feminism, doesn't really actually deconstruct the oppressive idea there. But a lot of feminist writers will recognize that, hey, our identity as a woman isn't an innate thing. Our identity as a woman is only as deemed by the patriarchal class oppressing us, and we have to identify as a woman in order to fight back against that. And, it's recognized, and so, and I am home, so I'm gonna get to the whole crux end issue here, which is why it's such a shame when you get trans people talking about bioessentialism, where it's yeah, man and woman are actually rigid binaries, but it's just that even though I was a binary, I was born as a man, that's just my external, and my internals are all actually part of the binary of women, and my brain is physically wired differently, but there's still a binary going on. And there are actually things innate to man and woman. Those people are just doing absolutely nothing but causing harm to themselves. People who aren't them, who are just part of another out group, just this normal cis women and men. And they're also causing harm to other trans people who recognize that there isn't a binary. And they don't necessarily believe in bioessentialism. They just believe that again, like even like more like my earlier days, they just don't vibe well with guys and more with gals, and that's why they want to identify as such. Bioessentialism arguments just actually just shit on that one person. They just give ammunition for the oppressive class to turn on themselves. Yeah, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. It's a very like kind of controversial topic, and again, I know I'm not like, and if that's one thing I could make very clear, is like I know I'm not necessarily the best mouthpiece for this sort of information, but that's why it's so important to read more. That's like just a big proponent of it, because what I'm saying here isn't like words that I have necessarily come from my own experience. It is a amalgamation of a lot of readings I have done from people who have like lived experience and then can express it in the more like principled terms. So yeah, I don't know. I just think this is why it's so important to be intersectional and read from your sort of blind spots. Yeah, I don't know. Anyone, thank you for watching. If you have anything else to add, like, please comment. I'd love to read and respond and whatnot, but thank you. Bye.